While Mike's figuring that out, has anyone seen this top 10 CI/CD security risks list from, I think it's called Cider is the company?
Yep.
I like that list a lot.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, cool,
Sure.
awesome. Yeah. So we've been talking with the Cider folks, actually, a bunch, trying to get them to give a demo or whatever
cool.
to either SLSA, CNCF. The main issue is because they're all out in Israel, the timing is often difficult for them. But we're trying to kind of get something set up, even if it's like a recorded demo or something like that. Yeah, they've shown off some cool stuff, and they're actually we're trying to kind of say, hey, it would be great if we could take those like top 10 and map them to stuff that SLSA is doing to prevent it and where it doesn't, and yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I like that list a ton. And then the CI/CD goat is really interesting. I'm interested in kicking the tires on that for sure. It'd be kind of fun, I'm sure, to do a little CTF internally.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, we're trying to also we're trying to work with them to maybe also have something like a Fresca goat, like, hey, here is here's what would happen if you disable this thing in Fresca. Now you lose this sort of guarantee, which would no longer make you SLSA compliant. Hey, if this thing wasn't working, this is what it would look like.
This is how it falls apart.
Yeah, so that we could also kick the tires and show folks like, hey, it's really about that holistic piece. You can't just you can't just be like, hey, I signed it, everything's fine. It's like, no, signing is just one step of the big picture.
Right. Yeah. Nice.
Can you share that list if it is handy? Anyone can.
Yeah, let me throw that in the chat. I've been kind of poking around at it. Oh, there you go. Nice one, Frederick.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Cool.
For sure. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, no, I like it as well. But before we get to the agenda, is there anybody new to the meeting who wants to introduce themselves? Or, well, hold on, one more person. Julian, let me just.
Hi all. I'm Dan Applequist. I'm really new to Sneak, and I'm really just attending some OpenSSF calls to try and get a handle on all of the work that's happening in the effort. And if I ask any questions, they'll probably be stupid questions, so I apologize in advance. Okay.
No, that's all right. It's still a lot of us are still getting, it's a broad space, so there's a lot of stuff out there.
So did you go to Dan, other than my name is Sunil and I work for SAP?
All right, cool. Yeah, anybody who hasn't put stuff in the let's just put your attendance in there. Okay, cool. So the agenda from last time was to start building out, or sorry, the outcome of last time was, so we prioritized largely where we think the different things we should be focused on are. And so now the next step has been to go one step further and actually list out some requirements so that we can now hands on keyboard, start doing some dev work. And so let me, this is linked inside of the notes, but I'll also share it 1 second over here. And I will share my screen as well. But so we've been, for folks who are relatively new, we kind of went through first, what is the state of SLSA tooling today? There's various different builders, various different generators, various different whatevers. There's different tools, like, there's like the Sigstore stuff for signing, and there's Notary that's coming out, and there's Recore, and there's all these different things that are there. Great. There's different build tools, like there's plugins being written for Jenkins to have SLSA there's GitHub Actions, there's Fresca, there's Tecton plus Chains, there's a bunch of different things. So there's a couple of big gaps, and the big gaps that we sort of discovered that we felt like we needed to prioritize as a group was the attestation distribution and discovery. So we know that there's a decent amount of builders, things to verify, and there's a lot of stuff on the policy end that's already been done, but there's not really a lot of things regarding distribution for, how do I actually give you my SLSA attestation? That sort of thing is being done in OCI for containers, but not really for generic packages like NPM or like in Maven or whatever, for jars and that kind of thing. So one big piece is, hey, how do we do package distribution, and what things are still required to do to at least get that started, so that when we start to do the push and finalize SLSA 1.0, we have a good setup there. Another thing is attestation discovery. So for folks who are like, hey, I'm not downloading a package, I want to just query about the ecosystem, right? Like, hey, can you show me the top 10 packages with SLSA attestations? Or, if packages are tagged certain ways, right? Like, I don't know, this is a a database client package. Great. Show me all database client packages with SLSA attestations or whatever, right? Like things like that I think people want to start to be able to ask, because if folks start to require, hey, I'm required to use packages with SLSA attestations. If certain packages don't have SLSA attestations, they want to know before they start really going deep in it. And so they want to be able to make decisions on that. They want to, and then it also helps them sort of understand their supply chain. Like if they go back and say, great, here's all the packages I've downloaded and their dependencies, which of these packages have SLSA attestations? And then there's also sort of the out of band attestation distribution. So given that not everything supports it via package distribution, we are looking at stuff like, hey, if I distribute you a file, a flat file that is a SLSA attestation that's a signed whatever, how do I send that over to you? How do I, what does that distribution look like? Is there REST endpoints we should be creating, whatever, for that sort of thing? So those are the three pieces for the high level requirements. Any questions on that so far?
And so there's so many different flavors, of course, right, Michael? Are we trying to solve and kind of create an example tool for just one of those scenarios to start, obviously?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff that's being done. And so it's a combination of, hey, for example, Ian and some of those folks have been doing the SLSA, like the generic generator for SLSA. And it uses JSON-L files. And, should we just sort of say, hey, can we push that as an established pattern? Like, does that make sense to the group? And, cool. Yeah, let's make that say that that's probably the way we should be. If you're doing sort of flat file distribution, maybe that's the way you should be doing it, versus like, oh, we've decided a different format is better or whatever. That's one thing. I think we are also looking at prioritizing, some of that, which is like, for example, there's the NPM RFC regarding this, and we have Frederick from GitHub on the call. And so like, hey, is this something that we could work with NPM on to see what the distribution mechanism should be, whether it is those JSON-L files or somehow included in the NPM package or whatever, because I know there's a bunch of debate going on in the RFC on that and so on. But I think that's kind of the generic thing. And then just trying to figure out like what are the main requirements, and then figuring out like, are there already established tools that just need to have features added to them, or do we need new tools? And kind of push that out. But I think we're trying to kind of figure out, these are the three big categories we kind of came out of some of the stuff in here and some of the comments over here. Now we can maybe get into some of the specifics on like a couple of high level priorities as a group we can start to push out. And I think it's going to be a combination of literal priority and then members of the group who actually have cycles to then push that.
Sounds good.
Cool. Any questions, comments on this? Does this sound like a reasonable approach to folks? Cool. I'm assuming no objections means it's all right. Okay, cool. So
Oh, I have a quick question about package distribution. Sorry, maybe I missed because I just joined the call. Is this something you plan to do like with every ecosystem separately, or are you thinking of something like generic? Or
I think we might have to first. I think we might have to first try it with one package ecosystem. See, hey, here's how it generally seems to work, and then try and abstract and be like, here's probably how it would generically work. Inevitably, there's going to be some outliers that you know, just the way that they maybe do a package is just like, yeah, we can't fit a thing in there, or we can't distribute it alongside or whatever, and we'll have to maybe have 2 or 3 flavors of it, or have to say, great, like this, we can't actually distribute it with the package in any way, so we have to use some out-of-band attestation distribution mechanism, like that, you know. But I think starting off, we can probably pick, you know, 1 or 2 things. Like OCI is more or less, you know, been done, and I don't know if folks saw, I think it was yesterday, the OCI spec changes got merged into main, which means that now attestations, SBOMs, etc., can now actually be types in OCI, which allow, and even beyond that, right? So now eventually you could potentially use OCI as like, oh, I include my npm packages in an OCI repo. They're just files there, and then npm install becomes sort of a, or you know, there's a proxy in front of there that actually does some of that work that can then distribute all the stuff there. But you know, it just becomes another blob inside of there with the manifest and everything else that can show, you know, can help out there. So that work just got merged yesterday. It hasn't been officially released, but that should be coming in the coming weeks.
cool. If you have a link to the
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. 1 second. Let me pull that up. 1 second. Yeah, this is a lot of folks have been working on this, but on my end, you know, one of the folks I work with in the open source community a lot, Brendan Mitchell, has been very spending a lot of time pushing it. So I'll just push it also both in, I will link in both this document, and I will also put it in the SLSA tooling meeting doc as well. Yeah. All right. So I linked both of those, so and we can just very quickly, because it is really big and also very impactful to what we're trying to do here, which is one is the OCI reference type stuff, which allow us to sort of here, let me see. It's kind of a lot of stuff to, and I don't remember exactly when each piece. Yeah, so these two are tied together, the image types and the distribution spec. Okay, and I won't go too deep into this, but basically it's regarding now, like there's now a manifest that allows you to kind of describe actually what's in there. There's now like largely, it's just objects. So objects could be, right, a blob, and that blob could be a container image. It could also be a signature. It could be a SLSA attestation. It could be whatever. And through stuff like, they call it artifact types, but they're essentially kind of like MIME types, I guess. It just allows you to kind of say, great, this is a signature file. And then you can actually go and say, okay, well, there's an associated signature with this image, and there's an associated attestation with this image, or there's an associated signature with this blob. And that makes obviously the distribution thing much, much simpler, because everything's just sort of encoded in OCI. And then when you go to pull, when you go to do that, you can say, great, I see there's an image, fetch me the signature or signatures associated with it, pull down the SLSA attestations associated with it. And if there isn't any, it's just, okay, so there's none. If there is them, it's just in the manifest. And so there doesn't have to be this hunting of that information.
So I have a follow-up question. Do you imagine like us or OpenSSF setting up a new registry? Because like I imagine there's like, I don't know how naming like namespaces would work. Like let's say you have PyPy and then you have npm, or like how do you see it working? Is it, or are you just planning on reusing existing registries?
I think, well, so I think the idea here is to work with the registry folks on these things. I think there is some discussion that we've tried to start with the OpenSSF around if there is at least, because inevitably that's going to take a while, right? Like getting, implementing all these changes in NPM and whatever else is going to take a while. It might make sense to start off by creating some generic, like, here's what it could look like, and here's what an implementation of that could look like. Like as just as an example, here is what, we took some NPM packages, pushed them as blobs into OCI. Here is like, we wrote a very simple sort of, even a shell script that goes and says, okay, well, I'm going to pull this down and then run an NPM install locally, but I pull it down, verify the SLSA signature, and then pass it to NPM or whatever, right? Like there's probably things we can do on that front just to start to show like what the flow might look like. But I do think the idea here is like, I don't think we're going to be able to do all of this on our own and be like, hey, great, we're forking everybody's, registry and saying this is where it all is. Does that make sense to folks?
Yeah, that makes sense. Like show what can be and show kind of the general direction we think it can go, and then get some more support.
Cool. So we can probably do, so I'll just put OCI here and but new images. Yeah, so the way that it currently, for folks who aren't aware, the way it currently works in SigStore is that there's a naming scheme for the actual blobs it pushes into OCI. So it essentially it's the digest of the image or whatever that you were signing. It's or attesting, and then .att for attestation, SBOM for SBOM or whatever. And using that is how folks sort of distribute it today. But of course, that doesn't really scale, because if it's not actually an SBOM or whatever, it becomes very difficult to sort of maintain. Compared to now, we have actually manifests that you can say, okay, I know that this is going to be this type, and I know it's supposed to have this thing associated with it, and that sort of thing. So I think this is something that we should be, at least some, and I don't know if anybody here is works with the OCI folks a reasonable amount, but I think somebody who, if somebody wants to take this as like a liaison, say, great, cool, now that this is done, what needs to actually get done to implement this in some of the tools? I believe Sigstore is already kind of ready for this. I don't know about Notary, which I think might be doing a little bit more of the Oris thing. I'm not 100% sure on that. If somebody's familiar with the Notary stuff, feel free to bring that up. Brendan?
Yeah, I think Mike Brown's probably the person to talk to on this. I can see whether I can get him onto this meeting to discuss that. But
Cool.
yeah, I think like my understanding with OCI, for the amount that I played with it, I feel like you could probably do a lot of these things today. I think the registry, unless they do additional validation, should take it. But yeah, I think it may be, we could possibly also maybe just experiment on like GHCR to see whether it's going to take the data. Because all of this is
Cool.
just a manifest. Unless I haven't looked at the PR, so unless it's adding additional fields that we have to use, if it's part of the manifest, then it should be fine.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm not super familiar outside of as an end user. Brendan, can you just sort of add a comment just with the person's name so we know, like, okay. We're looking into this to try and pull in somebody?
All right, yeah.
Cool, thanks. Shripad?
Yeah, so I had actually the question. So if we are storing these attestations and this thing in OCI, how do we refer them? Because the packages and they might be in different registry, right? NPM, it is in its own registry. For if it is in the same ecosystem, like image, we can do attach and we can store them together. But if it is across different registries.
Yeah, so I see what you're saying. So on that front, I'm talking purely from the perspective of you would distribute everything via OCI, and there is discussion from some folks about potentially leveraging essentially OCI as the backing storage for stuff like this. So you can imagine the actual files being used to do some of this. Sorry, the files that like, or let's say, and just to be clear, I'm not saying that NPM has agreed to this or anything like that, but you can imagine like, hey, an NPM package is actually being stored in OCI as like, with a data type, artifact type slash OCI. And then you have, and then like either NPM or a package, a package handler interface proxies that to then when you go to do NPM install, let's say the NPM tool now goes and says, okay, great. I know when I do NPM install, I pull from OCI in these ways, or I use a proxy and I pull it from that way. Something like that, I think is the way that some folks are starting to look at this. Now, granted, that sort of thing would take a lot of work and effort to get done because it's now you're completely changing how this works from, stuff like, HTTP endpoints that are being used to download these things to now a different mechanism.
Yeah, I think that's what I was thinking. This is a pretty long tail assumption, right? Like we don't know when that could happen across registries. So the flip side is there a way we can add this reference, external reference in those attestation, right? So from OCI, right? So you don't need to migrate everyone to OCI, right? They can be wherever they want, but there is some way to reference them.
Yeah, can you put that what you're thinking down in the out of band attestation distribution? Because I think that's actually like valuable some way. And actually, this is kind of maybe let's just actually ask Frederick. Frederick, what sorts of things are you folks looking at from the NPM side to like distribute the SLSA attestations?
Yes, so we are currently looking into relying on the NPM registry itself to serving the attestations. The major reason for that is sort of from, let's say, reliability perspective. We do not want to rely on third-party system we don't have control over that could potentially stop our users from installing or downloading packages if they are verifying them. So that's sort of where we are right now. It will not be in the package itself. It will be a separate file that you would need to download. The exact mechanism or schemas, etc. for this is not fully yet specified, but we are working on this right now.
Cool. Yeah, I think on that end, if there's any open questions that you think that you want additional input from our end, feel free to kind of pull us in. And then also, once you do make once some of those decisions are sort of out, I think we would be interested to know so that we can say, great, now here's probably what the, because we anticipate, I assume, right, given that, how large NPM is, if NPM is doing it a certain way, most likely other folks will start following either that way or a very similar way to the same problem. So I think that will help out as we also then begin to build tooling for the other ecosystems.
Yeah, I can reach out to you. I'm gonna go on PTO now for 2 weeks, but I will definitely contact you when I'm back. And I think because then I think the team has started to sort of sort out a few things as well. So I can try to get something on your calendar at that time, and we can start to talk about this.
Cool. Is anybody else on the call familiar with any other package managers that are starting to look, package managers or package ecosystems that are starting to look at SLSA attestations and distribution of those SLSA attestations? I know that some of that, like I know I saw for Python, there's like URL lib and a few other packages are starting to use the GitHub generator to generate those JSON-L files. The one obviously issue right now is that you need to be very specific, like you need to have access to that JSON-L file to then later, Frederick, using those JSON-L files as this distribution mechanism, but have folks given any thought who are in that space on how this might get refined into something that's actually in kind of Python tooling?
So I can speak a little bit about Java because we've been thinking about it. We know it's doable and we're working on it on the side. It's basically, we will include it in the, I think the jar, the final jar. Also, I forgot what it is, the Maven. I don't know if it's a tarball including the jar, but we can add the attestation in there. And the idea that we had for the consumer was maybe to create a little Maven plugin so that we can play around with verification on the consumer side. None of this is very hard. Sigstore already has a Maven plugin where they show how you can package up everything. So we're going to follow something similar. That's the idea that we have, at least for Java.
Cool. And do you know, so is Maven run by Sonatype? Is that correct?
Yes. So yeah, we wanted to have like a little proof of concept end-to-end.
Okay.
And then reach out to, get the ball rolling on their side. I know that they are on board with Sigstore. I don't know, what's their state of mind for like SLSA in general, but yeah, that's kind of how we're thinking about it.
I realize that this is no longer just a list of requirements. I'll just call this work. Cool. That makes sense. Does anybody have anything else for any of the other package managers? I just saw Mike has joined the call. Hi, Mike.
Hey, everybody. How's it going?
Good. So I guess we had a couple of questions for you because we know that we just saw that the image spec and distribution spec work just got merged.
Yes. Well, as far as the way it's merged so far, I mean, it's in a branch on main, right? It's not been approved for release yet. We'll still need to do a
Well,
bunch of fixes. Yeah.
oh, cool. Yeah. No. But we know it's been several months in the in the making.
I would say more several years that we've been talking about this, and we're excited about it. You know, we're going to merge this. We're going to get some APIs for you guys to use, and we'll get that out to the you know, all the different tools. As I mentioned, I'm a maintainer for Containerd and the distribution specification. We're excited to bring this forward to you guys. It's going to happen probably faster than expected, but it still needs, you know, some flushing out. We started to do some negotiations and architectural discussions in Containerd, you know, just this week on how we're going to bring this in, where we'll pull the new artifacts in and how, right? We're going to need tooling and APIs at all the layers so that you can you know, create the new artifacts, push them with links and you know, refers, references to the existing images, that sort of thing. We want to do it with performance though. So it's going to be interesting because there'll be different patterns where people, you know, do these things either in band with the graph for the images or out of band, and, you know, just adding additional artifacts that point to existing images, right? But I'm not sure how much, you know, detail you guys need here. I could probably bring a summary if you'd like in some, you know, future meeting.
Sure. Yeah, I think that would be helpful. Because yeah, like we know that, you know, today a lot of that stuff has been either being done a little bit ad hoc via, like, you know, hey, the toolings, and it's not really, you know, following the spec per se.
Right.
And like, you know, because like right now, you know, SigStore, the way that they are sort of handling sort of signatures and attestations is just sort of here's some additional blobs with a specific naming scheme, and that's how it's used to sort of verify. And then the OCI stuff will make it much simpler and more interop and all that great stuff. And so I think just as we kind of go through that, there's, I know, some open questions I think even we have at the bottom of this doc. One of the ones was, you know, hey, like, would something like this even look like, you know, would the artifact type for a SLSA attestation be something like OpenSSF.intoto.salsa.v1 or something like that, or?
Right. So what we're asking the people to do when they come up with a new artifact type like this one is to register it at IANA. You know, once you've got it, you know, really solid on what you want to do, you know, and then we'll allow you to create that artifact in our, you know, registries, you know, push it up, pull it down, that sort of thing, and you'll be able to have it be, you know, an image that references, right, these other things. Basically refers to a particular thing that's being signed, right? And you'll say, you know, our media type is this IANA type. So we have a place for you to actually, you know, say what your type is that defines what the blob contents is for the artifact, as well as, you know, what you're pointing to, the type that you're pointing to, which would be an OCI image, for example. Or it could be you're signing another artifact, like an SBOM. It sort of depends what you're signing, right? But you'd have the same, your same IANA type. We're not going to, you know, slow you guys down though. If you just need to go through the IANA process, if you will, you know, to specify your formatting.
Oh yeah. And to be clear, we're ready for that once we make a few other things a little bit clearer and we better understand how some of the things work. I think the thing is, yeah, we just want to know, yeah, well, what do we actually need to do to actually get this out there when we are ready?
Right. Now if you guys, you know, end up being the standard, you know, signing type, which is very likely, then, you know, we'll probably want to register that as a list of recommended types to be used, right? In the artifacts, plural, you know, registry, where we can just, you know, highlight you as something that's gone through the IANA process, you know, show demonstrations, examples of how to use it. link to the code where it's currently tools are currently located for storing. I assume that you're going to want either to store your signatures in your own signing registry, but also in an image registry, right?
Yeah. So a lot of folks, even today, what they're sort of doing is they have some of this in a transparency log or a ledger of some kind.
Right.
For tamper evidence and all that sort of stuff. And then they also, and then for the distribution piece, it's very simple to say, great, it's stored alongside the OCI, whatever, right? Whether it's whether it is an image or some other artifact.
I think it's point to recognize that we're currently only allowing you to store these artifacts in the same registry by digest. We don't have tags or anything like that. So you probably want to take a look at the examples. We don't have a way yet to have third-party remote pulls into the registry or from the client tools for some signer. Although you could write some a different kind of application to do that inside of Containerd. We'll support plugins and things like that as well.
Okay, cool. So I guess a follow-up question is, if I have so can the types only refer to things in the same registry?
Yeah, at this point, if you look at the new refers API, it allows you to query for things that are referring to a particular digest in this registry. It's not I suppose you could come up with another design where the registry gets its artifacts from a remote location, but that's probably not going to be what you want for performance reasons. And for attestation, like I said, you might want to have a digest on the index, right? And the index has a list of manifests now, including the artifact manifest. So if you already knew what your signatures were, you could actually push an index with that artifact in it that has it refers to the things that are being signed. Okay. That way you can have just one digest for the whole index. And when they pull that index, we would probably want to get the platform manifest for that image, as well as the artifacts that include the signatures that are pointing to the parts of that platform image, if that makes sense.
Cool.
Just for performance reasons. Now, of course, we don't have patterns yet for when you would want to pull any of these artifacts. So it could also be that you just want to pull the image as is done today, and then make another connection to find artifacts that have the references to the digests that you've pulled in cache.
Cool. Yeah, that's definitely very, very helpful, because I know one of the other things that's kind of coming down, and we're still not sure whether it's just store some of these attestations in a different database or whatever.
Yeah, that's tricky, isn't it?
Yeah.
And do you want to have them local on cache references, right? Or which would require the client tooling to also support the refers API, or should it just be in the image? I don't think we've got a good feel yet for how these things are going to play out. I suspect there'll be two patterns. One pattern for, let's say, a bank who wants to make sure that that what they push is what they're getting back always, and they've got to digest that for the entire graph and artifacts, signatures, SBOMs, etc., and scan results that are pointing or talking about the the image that we've requested for this platform.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's definitely some open discussions among some folks about what something like a third party without access to your registry, but access to the thing, saying like, hey, I want to make an assertion, like I did a scan, like for example, Sneak or whoever, hey, we did a scan and we saw that this seems good, and we want to make a separate third party assertion about this thing.
That's right, Michael. I guess in my view, that's good if you want to accept third party
Yes.
perspectives on your images and your artifact. I mean, what if they're encrypted? We do have Brandon here, right? How are you going to scan my encrypted images? I don't know about that. I'm not sure how that works. So yeah, this is going to be fun. It's going to be a fun year.
Yeah, yeah. On that end, we out of band, we should have a chat because we've been looking at that with trusted execution environments and the such.
Yep.
Thanks. Cool. So
at the spec level, we're trying to support both models, right? So we're not being too restrictive yet. So we'll see what happens.
Awesome. This is really useful to better understand what is supported, where things are going. Laurent.
Oh no, sorry. Finish the discussion. It's.
Oh no, I was just saying. Yeah, this is.
I have a follow-up question.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was just saying. Yeah, this is really great in helping us better understand, and as we begin to build out and start to look at building out the tools, this will be really helpful. Sorry.
And the composition of provenance and how you discover provenance when you have a container and say its base image and maybe stuff that you pull in while you compile. So I guess, let's say you have a distroless base image and then you do something with Python. So I'm wondering how you can refer to this in the specs. I heard last year that you can now say in your manifest that, you know, this is the base image that I use to build the container. But I'm wondering if, like, I haven't looked into it, and I'm wondering how, if anyone has, and how the different layers can actually report to the, you know, the Docker compiler about things that they've built and that they want to expose in the manifest, such as, you know, an SBOM or a base image and these sort of things, so that you can start doing recursive provenance verification and this sort of stuff.
I guess I can talk a bit about, at least from the SPDX angle, what we're doing. So I've been working with Adolfo and DHL, and like kind of we're trying to specify like how to create an SBOM to kind of encode all these things, and I think we have the issue open in the SPDX examples people. So let me paste the link in here. But I think exactly like we're trying to figure out, you know, how do you encode the SBOM, how do you encode all the information that you actually want to make some policy decisions on, and you know, hopefully that can be part of the SBOM.
Okay, I guess my question also goes into how should the container be written? How should the Docker file be written so that the compiler is aware of what it should be looking at? Because like a base image is something that's built in, so I suppose Docker will have a way to expose it. But let's say if I'm doing an npm install and there's a sort of an SBOM that comes out, are we going to rely on a post build scanning, or do we imagine that Docker build would basically say, oh, this new folder /SBOM, just put all your SBOM there, and before I package up the final container image, I'll remove this and expose this to a third-party tool, or like invoke another tool to maybe create an SBOM or like something else. I'm not sure if that's clear.
I think one of the things we're also working and discussing on is like this SBOM composition stuff. So being able to take multiple SBOMs and then link them together. I think the open question is still on like discovery of the SBOM. So like if a Docker container sees like an npm bundle, right? How does it retrieve the SBOM there? We have a KubeCon talk that we are kind of proposing some of this, at least initially with Sixstar. But I think like the distribution and sharing, the discovery mechanism is still kind of up in question. I think that's like a little bit of what we're doing Guac for as well, to kind of solve that.
So yeah, I know that there's a bunch of stuff happening on that end. One thing, just from a a POC that we've done in the past to help out with this sort of thing is, yeah, we sort of wrap the actual distro list image creation piece with an SBOM, and then we just sort of distribute that alongside it. So that when, and we just sort of, like, that's not in the spec, but we just sort of by convention sort of say, great, we know that there's an SBOM here for this thing. And so we pull that down. And then so now we have, we have a base SBOM, the actual thing, and, some other things as well there, which works. It's not ideal, right? Until, if some of that sort of stuff gets standardized, where it becomes much easier to say, great, here, I can always like have an SBOM link to some higher level SBOM until it can't anymore. That definitely helps out.
So are you doing it on each layer? Do you say layer number 1 is like the lowest, and then layer number 2 can basically use the previous one, like you scan like this, and at the end you say this is the graph, or like the relationship? Oh.
So we've been doing it a little bit by convention. Like we use Nix to sort of generate that distro list sort of image. And then we just sort of have a separate builder. And because that separate builder was at the time using Bazel, it just sort of then built it that way. And so we just had those 2 layers. Like it would begin to fall apart if we ended up doing lots of different, like, hey, I now have another layer that's installing a bunch of other stuff. I have another layer that's installing, I think that would become significantly harder to sort of link. I think practically, one of the things that just from a best practices standpoint, similar with abstractions, it's like once you start getting tons of layers, it becomes much harder to kind of reason about it. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, because and you can, with layers, you can also, you can remove stuff, and layers can be rebased on top of each other, and it becomes difficult. Like actually the ordering of the layers is how things, so that's why just by convention we've mostly just said, initial layer is like the base image, and then the next layer is the actual thing we're building.
Okay. No, I was just asking about the layers. I don't know if we need this level of complexity. Like it can be flat. Like the last layer has everything. And anyway, well, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. And once again, we could be also wrong. Like that's just just to sort of deal with we decided to say, hey, let's avoid the complexity, but also not everybody can. So cool. So with the last like 9 minutes or so, are there any additional sort of package distribution things that folks wanted to kind of bring up? Otherwise, we can either go into sort of out of band attestation distribution or attestation discovery and talk a little bit about that. Cool. Well, given that these 2 things are linked right now, the out of band and the package distribution, and it very much, it seems like it depends on, hey, if NPM decides to go a certain route, okay, cool. Now we need to have out of band attestation distribution. Does it make sense just to kind of talk through a little bit of the attestation discovery piece? And Brendan, do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I know you've been doing some work on that front.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, self advertisement here, marketing, but yeah, a couple of us have been working on a graph, a kind of graph discovery project called Block. It's still kind of like heads down in coding, but this is the link to the project. Obviously, we welcome, it's a fully open source project, welcome other contributors as well. But basically, we are going to have, so a couple of us already also on the call, so Michael, Path. Yeah, so one of the things that we're doing is we're collecting all the information, whether it's from OCI registries, from Zigsaw. We're processing them, doing the validation, and then including them in like a Neo4j graph database. And so the graph database will include all the information. It will extract the relationships out of all the attestations and then create the links between the nodes in the graph. and it also tie back to identity. So then you can do a graph query to figure out, a query by hash to find out what to find out notable artifact and all the documents that are linked to it, as well as linked to its transitive dependencies. And being able to also link back and do the verification as well to see that, okay, these documents were actually verified. This was how it was verified. And if you want, you can also do the verification by yourself.
Yeah, and just as a couple other things just to add in there is like the idea here is, as an end user, we hope it helps answer questions for folks. Like I was saying, maybe a little earlier, was it should help answer the questions like, hey, I'm required to have SLSA attestations for my for my packages. So what packages can I include that have SLSA attestations, and being able to like start to do queries against that and kind of pull some of that information out. And then as well as like the things that people are starting to discuss, which is like there's stuff coming out of the SLSA spec and SLSA positioning about, I think they called it SLSA conformance, right? Like if you're compliant with SLSA as a SLSA builder, or if you're compliant with SLSA as a SLSA project, like there's going to be a mechanism to sort of prove that, right, to the world, or have a third party that has been, they're an audit firm and they're trusted. Cool, they've stamped your thing, and so you might say, great, I'm a big bank, I trust these audit firms, so can I go out and validate those things and see, for example, here's public information, here's maybe some private information from some other folks, or here's third parties that have attested that thing, this we know that, for example, at some point, oh, it turns out this identity, right, whatever it might be, this maintainer or this organization turned out to be bad actors. Great, we're going to sort of, I know, me as an end user no longer trust that. Aaron?
I'm curious, like the idea behind this type of database. Would this be like just one big database for like everything, or would there be, like a Guac database for different package management systems, and maybe even would organizations, private organizations, post their own internal databases? I wonder.
It's a little of all of that, I think.
Yeah.
First and foremost, we want to, similar to Recorb, which is a public transparency log, I believe, Brendan, right, that the idea is to make this a public service. Obviously, with that public service would have to come a lot of restrictions on what is allowed in there, what is not allowed in there, how we're actually pulling it in, SLAs, SLOs, right? Because it'd be very easy to denial of service this thing, or otherwise, push illegal content or whatever into there. And so there's definitely stuff on that end. But also, as somebody who recently reformed from the banking industry, that sort of thing is, and banks are always just going to say, great, that's great. We want to mirror all that content internally. We want to, maybe pull in a graph from a separate, like, I don't know, FireEye or whatever, right? Like, some other third party that is, maybe Sneak or whatever, that has all this other information. And we want to pull in their graph, or we want to pull in data from that they might just be giving out, and then we want to add it to our graph. Stuff like that, I think, is going to be inevitable.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like I could even see like a private company, like a bank, if they're, or something, offering their own software, and they're doing like a read-only type Guac for people as consumers, right? And then they're able to specifically upload what they want to upload or display what they want. That'd be kind of neat.
Yeah, no, that's 100% where we would like to see this go, because we do think that there's, and there's going to be lots of different ways that people are going to want to distribute this, and Guac is just going to be one of those ways. And but we hope to kind of, make it easy so that folks can like better understand and answer questions. Like, okay, I downloaded these 50 things. Like, are there any major CVEs without vexes, for example? Like, you can ask that sort of question to the graph. And including data that, like, okay, including the data that came out of Sneak, including the data that came out of this tool, and including the attestation that came out of all these different places, tie it all together, and be able to kind of, you know, answer some of those deep questions are really important.
I think also with the graph database stuff, going back to like having different graphs and doing queries across them, it's a pretty common query pattern. So that's something that will be like some sort of federation will be supported.
Cool.
Cool. So we only got 2 minutes. Anything else people wanted to talk about or otherwise add as like an agenda item for next week? Cool. Well, either way, so for next week, I know a few folks have talked about different things that they want to start poking around with here, and next week we could probably finish up the rest of this, the rest of the pieces here around attestation discovery and out of band attestation distribution, and really start to look at like, cool, here's a let's open up this PR on this open source project to add that feature, or you know, start tying it back to GitHub issues that maybe we can start to address, or at least tie things together. Sound good to everybody?
That sounds good. One other thing, Michael, from a couple of weeks ago, I forget what the actual action item was. Were we going to make a pull request for the SLSA actual website to kind of list some of those tools? I might not have caught that.
Yeah. So Naveen said he was going to make something, and then I don't know. I'll see if I could follow up with him if he actually got around to
Okay.
doing it.
I'm not trying to call him out.
Otherwise, no.
I'm volunteering to
No,
help
just
him
to be
as
clear,
well.
yeah, no, to be clear, we all have way too much stuff on our plate, so I'm sure like I do too. And I've forgotten about some of these things. So if he like all of a sudden's like, yeah, I just don't have the cycles, that's fine. We could just assign it to somebody else. And I'm saying not me, because I have too much. Cool. Oh, so we're at time. So I'll see you all next week.
Thanks.
Thanks,
See ya.
everybody. Bye.